This that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but their stories should be heard.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday morning and Hair of the Dog. I am Kerri Barber, and I have with me my lovely co-host, Andy Kennedy. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning, Kerri. How are you doing this morning?
It's Friday, so I guess that means I have a field trip that I'm actually going on today. First time in 3 weeks. So my plan today is to hit the grocery store. So I have my PPE, the little paper mask, and masking tape. So because I don't trust it. So that is my grand adventure. So
you're going out to the store to buy masks and masking tape because you're just about out? No, groceries. You're getting groceries.
I'm getting groceries. So my husband's multi-billion-dollar employer was gracious and generous enough to start calling employees back to the office and handed each of one of them 4 of the paper masks.
Wow, 4.
And they told each and every one of them that each mask is good for 40 hours. And I went, no.
40 hours. Is that concurrent? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So if they come to work and they bill for 40 hours, one $3 mask should be more than sufficient to keep them all safe. Now, they've had multiple employees test positive for COVID. I don't know that there have been any deaths, but 4 masks.
I'm surprised they don't describe it as 3 to 5 business days.
That's exactly right. So, like everyone else, my better masks are on order. We're waiting. So today I'm doing the paper mask. But speaking of masks and deflecting, presidential candidate, presumptive nominee Joe Biden appeared on Morning Joe this morning, and I watched that program. So I found myself screaming at my phone. I was watching it on my phone doing fact checking. But I will give Mika. Mika did the Q&A. She did an excellent job in stating the question, restating the question, and kind of holding him to his answers. What I thought was interesting was we know he's got his archive from his Senate days at the University of Delaware. So she did ask about that. She's like, well, we this could end all arguments. Why not open the archive? And he kind of deflected a little bit and said it was the university's decision. Well, it's not. They can open the archive at any time. At first they said it was some arbitrary number, and now they're saying after he leaves public life. So she did a good job of pushing back on that because why not just open it? And his answer was, well, those are this is the part where I started yelling at my phone. He said, those are records from when I was in service, my speeches, my position papers, and while I'm a candidate, I don't want those used against me or taken out of context. And I was like, wait, isn't that the very... That's the nature of an election, to go through your position papers and you have a record.
I want you to use what I said before.
Right, exactly. Even out of the context of the Terry Reid allegations, I think that those papers are paramount, right? We want to understand better why you made these decisions and really get the inside scoop on it. I don't know. I'm kind of a fan of transparency. But then his deflection was, well, any personnel records are going to be at the National Archive. And I'm instructing them to open the records for Tara Reid. And then this is where I give Mika credit. She asked him, well, why just the records with Tara Reid? Why not all of them? And he really didn't have a good answer for that. And I think that when we're talking about two particular candidates, and ethics is a part of it, like we can see now Trump has had 3.5 years to govern, and we have plenty to pull apart there. Joe Biden has a career in Congress and plenty to pull apart there. Now let's look at character. And I think that there are character questions with both of these candidates, especially when,
I would say that a lot of Joe Biden's answers to any of this could be, well, I haven't had to do anything so far, so why are you asking me these hard questions now?
Right.
Right? And I can see if it ever got to the point of a debate between him and Trump on televised debate, which I seriously doubt because there's still a long way to go to that. But like conceivably, you could have a lie meter in each corner over either candidate and just, flash the number of lies each one tells, right? And then at the end, that could be a category to see who told the least amount of lies.
Oh, well, it could be. It absolutely could be. And this was just where... all right, so he also released a statement before he went on Morning Joe, and it's on Medium. Apparently Medium is where you put it all out. But one of the things that I really want to push back on is he kept saying over and over again, why is she coming out now? Why is this after and he kept saying 27 years. She didn't just come out now. She's been saying this for a number of years, not just now. So I think the strongest case that Mika made this morning was she was reading his own statement about the Kavanaugh hearings and holding him accountable for the things he said there, that we believe, if there's some credibility, we believe them, and there must be some truth to it. He didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, this really hasn't hit the mainstream media until now. Right? And I think that there is some leeway now in reporting on this because of the fallacy of Biden not having any opponents. Right? When we obviously we know that none of the candidates have dropped out. They basically just suspended their campaigns. Right? So they now feel that they can, because they've been chomping at the bit. Right? They've had this inner battle going on within mainstream media about the sensationalism of reporting on this, but wanting to protect the centrist candidates, right? So it's a fight back and forth. What do we do with this, right? Because we could run with the sensationalism because it really doesn't matter because Biden's going to be the preemptive guy, or do we sit on it and allow him to continue looking like the angel because most people are watching us and we can just control the narrative that it's just started, that the previous 27 years haven't counted for anything because we haven't talked about it.
You know what, Andy? I am so sorry to say this, but both Mika and Joe would say that you're fake news this morning, because they were adamant that mainstream media has already vetted this, already done everything they should have done, and was on the forefront of bringing this issue out, and after their thorough investigation found no real credible evidence in any of this. They forgot apparently about Ryan Grimm and Katie Halper and Rich McCune. They forgot about all of these reporters who were harassed, intimidated, and tried to, that the mainstream media ignored it for a month and a half. And that was this round of it, not necessarily talking about last month. But I do want to bring on our guest now because he can answer all of these things.
And more.
And more. So this morning we are so privileged to have with us Daniel Epstein, who's an attorney from Illinois. He ran for state Supreme Court. And what was absolutely shocking about his campaign is two things. Number one, he ran as a progressive, an open progressive. I was like, wow, that never happens. You try to hide your political affiliations. No, he was right out there. Second, his entire campaign was about telling the truth about how our court system actually works. And it's jaw-dropping when you actually hear what he has to say. So let's bring him on, and he can help us debate through all of these horrific issues. So, Daniel, good morning.
Morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for waking up and joining us here. So we have our coffee. I'm not even going to ask what you have. We have a don't ask, don't tell. It's a cup. And it's Friday, so it doesn't really matter. But so weighing in on these kind of debates, right? This is, you're an attorney, and you have to argue for the best interest of your client. So when we're talking about bringing out the facts of whether it's Joe Biden or Trump or whatever, how far is too far? When we talk about this, you were a candidate. If somebody had come up and said, "Hey, Daniel was doing some weird things," what would your level of expectation be in vetting out those facts?
Yeah, I mean, well, as a candidate, you kind of have to steel yourself against anything, right? Kind of you're putting your full self out there. As a lawyer, sometimes we talk about making decisions on the merits or not on the merits, right? And the interesting thing that's different about politics and law is that in law we kind of have a set of rules that helps tell us what the merits are. What are the important things that we're supposed to be looking at to help us make a decision? But in politics, every voter gets to decide for themselves what the merits are, right? And if your personality is part of the merits, or your intellect or your history of decision making or any of these things. I mean, the interesting thing about politics, and one of the reasons that it can get so personal sometimes, is that voters, decide that the personal stuff is on the merits. And so I think, everyone has to make that decision for themselves as a voter, I think. And certainly I think, people have gone too far when they tried to get people's family involved in ways that I think don't necessarily bear on the candidate themselves. I think there's an important kind of wall you have to set up to make sure that you're actually talking about the person.
You bring up a good point.
These kinds of things, but the candidates don't get to decide what the merits are.
Yeah, we just had an interview. The night before, Sarah Smith, who ran for Congress and had this bizarre situation where her own mother was trying to sabotage her campaign on Twitter. So
I don't know if you remember this a little while ago, but there was a candidate who ran, and it was a devastating ad where I think it was a 30-second, maybe even a minute ad. And for the first kind of 3/4 of the ad, it was all people saying terrible things about the candidate. And then in the very end, it's like, oh, they're their siblings. The siblings of the candidate are saying this. They're like, I'm their brother, I'm their sister, and please don't vote for them. I remember watching that and being like, whoa, that is an extraordinarily effective ad, but brutal.
South Dakota. That was South Dakota, and the person that was running was like a Tea Party person. That was their political leanings. I remember that ad. That was like 4 years ago, and it was effective because it stuck with us. But so part of the reason we wanted to bring you on this morning is we've been having this complex, interesting conversation about supply lines, right? So we started Monday with the premise that in any military excursion, you protect your supply line. Battles are won or lost by the supply. And we took that into several different spaces. Political as a candidate, the money and volunteers and things like that to protect your supply line. We explored a little bit about the media, and from a progressive point of view, we don't have those spaces for our candidates and causes necessarily, unless, it's the Sunrise Movement and a bunch of kids getting thrown out of Nancy Pelosi's office. That apparently is newsworthy, but not their message. So we've explored so many different things, and now we wanted to bring you in and talk about like the supply line that we're trying to break. This is from schools to prisons, for-profit prisons, and the nature of contracts that states sign about you have to have a certain number of beds or the states get fined. Me as a taxpayer, I have to pay for that. So you have some really great and terrifying things to say about where this begins from a legal system in the courts. So you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean it's a great way of thinking about it. First of all, it's a really interesting frame. And the first thing that comes to my mind is not even, of course, just talking about supply lines and kind of military. I was reading about something recently on topic, which is canning food was a huge military advantage. Being able to can food, Napoleon was able to expand the reach of his military because of the invention of canned food. Because what it means is your supply lines are able to go much farther because you don't have to. It makes it much easier to feed your military as you extend into enemy territory, and so if you can preserve food rather than having it go bad as you extend out, it's a huge military advantage. So next time you're eating preserves, jam or Spam or something like that, you got to realize it's as important a military advancement as the weapons that they carry sometimes. And so this supply line idea is underrated in importance. It can be the difference between how big of a territory and how far you're able to go as a military, and in other contexts, I think it plays a really important role as well. And I think one of the things you have to think about in terms of the court, but anywhere, is what are the resources that your endeavor relies upon, and where are you getting them from, and when. So I think no one will be surprised to find out that our institutions, including government institutions, rely on money. A lot of the services that they provide cannot persist without money. And so the question is, and that applies to our justice system as well. Our justice system, our prison system, and those are things that require money. So where does it come from, and when, is a really important question. And unfortunately, in certain contexts, that money can come from defendants and defendants' families, but only in the event of a conviction. So there's something called fees and assessments in Illinois, and this is played out in a few other places as well. But the court itself is entitled to extra funds if it convicts. Right? They get extra assessments if it convicts. If they don't convict, if there's an acquittal, they are not entitled to those funds. Right? And so if you're concerned about a court system whose supply of cash is contingent on convictions, that's a big problem, right? If you're thinking about it from a supply perspective, you're saying, where am I going to get the resources to keep this thing running? Part of the answer of that is through convicting people, not by finding truth, which is traditionally what we think our court is supposed to do, not by finding truth, but by finding guilt. And if you don't find guilt, that cash might not flow. And so it's a big problem. It's a structural problem, because I think what we really want out of our courts is for them to be finding truth and for them to restore victims, restore the community, and even to restore offenders themselves. But if you can't get to the finding truth part without running aground of bad incentives, you're in a real difficult position. That continues to be a problem in the context of things like bail, right? In Illinois, there's something called D-bond. D-bond is bail is the process by which you determine where someone spends the time between getting tried or between getting arrested and going to trial. And a judge is supposed to make that decision based on two things. First, is the defendant a threat to public safety, right? If we let them go home, are they going to be a danger to someone or to the community? If the answer is yes, they're a threat, then stop there, they're going to stay in jail. But if the answer is no, they're not a threat to public safety, then they go to a second question, which is what do we need to do to get them to come back to court, right? That's the second thing. Protect public safety, make sure they come back to court. And historically, we've answered that second question by saying we need you to put down bond, but we need you to put down cash in order to make sure that you're going to come back. It's like a security, right? You're going to put down money. If you don't come back, you're going to lose that money. So you have a financial incentive to return. But what that really means is you've had people who are not a threat to public safety. They've been deemed safe to return to the community. They're presumed innocent, right? They haven't been tried yet. But they'll nevertheless linger in jail simply because they don't have that cash, right? They'll linger in jail sometimes for years because they don't have that cash. And here's the really interesting part. Even if everything goes perfectly, right? The defendant puts down the cash, they come back to court, they go to their trial, they're found not guilty, and they come back to get that cash back. The county or the county in which they're operating is going to keep 10% of that. And that can get pretty large, and that money is relied upon to fund certain public institutions.
Wait. So, okay, so let me get this straight. So when we see the headlines of somebody who has got parking tickets and they go to court because they said, I can't pay the parking ticket, minimum wage worker, maybe working one or two jobs, and then they can't afford to post bond or bail, if I've got the terminology right. So that person now sits in jail not earning anything, and they still can't pay these parking tickets. And if for some reason a judge decides to dismiss it, now the state is taking its grift, right? We have not adequately funded our own systems, so now it's another tax imposed upon the working person who had to go through this.
So the way it works, you got it mostly right. I haven't seen that in the case in the context of unpaid parking tickets, but you see it in terms of all kinds of charges, right? So anything that you could spend time in prison for, you're first arrested and potentially taken to jail. And if you cannot pay the bail that is set in a D bond, then you very well may linger in jail, and that is absolutely the case for many people throughout this state and actually throughout the country. And it is a process that is supposed to be about those two things that I mentioned. That is supposed to be about public safety and making sure people come back to court. But what we know is there is this financial incentive for the county, because if they issue that D bond as opposed to just releasing someone on their own recognizance, then they are they're helping their bottom line.
That is insane. Okay, so how much of the fee structure go? All right, I'm just trying to piece this together, because one of the things that we talked about earlier in this week with Professor Yule was, like in my own county, the sheriff's office was making up for a budget shortfall by providing taxi service for ICE and immigration. So they were collecting upwards of $14 million just to provide taxi service for anyone that ICE had arrested and detained to bring them down to Gary, Indiana. So when we put in a new rule that the sheriff could not enter into those contracts on his own with full autonomy, we were now jeopardizing $14 million of their operating income. So how much of the court's budget is actually dependent upon what goes on in a courtroom?
Yeah, it varies from place to place. So a lot of this stuff is at the state level, and different states have different policies around this. In Illinois, it's very difficult to find out. I actually don't know the answer to that, in part because the Illinois Supreme Court is responsible for producing the statistics on that, and we haven't disaggregated those figures in a way to make it possible to find out. What we do know is that in Illinois, at least, the county, the clerk is able to take 10% of the D bond. So here's how it would play out. Kerri, you've been arrested and charged with robbery. We're going to, I'm the judge, I'm going to set your D bond at $90,000. And what that means is, in order to get out and go home and spend that time preparing for trial at home rather than in jail, you're going to have to put up 10% of that, which is $9,000. If everything goes well and you're found not guilty and all is perfect, then at the end of the proceedings, you'll come back to collect your D bond, and you're going to say, please give me my $9,000 back, and I'm going to say, congratulations, here's your $8,100. And you're going to say, well, wait, no, I gave you $9,000. And we're going to say, yep, but we get to keep, as the county, we get to keep 10% as an administrative fee. Now in Cook County, that's capped at $100. That's a good thing, but elsewhere it's not. And in fact, there was a case not that long ago where someone had a $35,000 administrative fee. And he was trying to get that back. So that really adds up, right? Because there's a ton of these cases, right? We have an enormous flow of cases in Illinois, and you may wonder whether part of that is because there are profit motives at hand, and it's hard to tease out. It's hard to find out. So the bottom line is that's not something we should have to worry about, right? We shouldn't have to worry about whether a court has any motives other than finding truth. That's the bottom line. And all these kind of outside incentives that could be playing a role even subtly, I don't think they're good. They're not even good economically down the road, right? Because that time, let's say you can't pay that $9,000, right? You're going to spend that time in jail. Best case scenario is the state gets like $900 as an administrative fee at the end. But in the meantime, we're spending an enormous amount of resources keeping you in jail. So it's not even really a good accounting. It's just bad practice.
Yeah, and the irony is here in Illinois, they would probably collect more in taxes if you were able to remain working. So, I mean, it's just kind of the nature of the thing. So I don't know if you can speak to the for-profit prison system, because most states have contracts with their prison administration to, they have a quota. If you don't provide enough human capital to fill these beds, and the contract actually is per bed, then the state itself gets fined. And that comes out of the funds that I pay as a taxpayer for the benefit of my state. So they actually lose money in the operating budget by not having these beds full for a for-profit company. Do you believe that has any effect on what's happening in the courtrooms? I mean, realistically, it shouldn't, but what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some courtrooms the answer is probably absolutely not, and in some courtrooms the answer is absolutely yes, and we know that because this is actually played out, right? I don't know if you remember in Pennsylvania there was this Kids for Cash scandal.
Yes, I was thinking of that in particular. Mm-hmm.
It's completely outrageous, but what was going on was a judge he was convicted later, but for many years was sentencing juveniles to juvenile detention, including in cases where it really was not merited. And what they found out was that he had a deal with the private prison where he basically got kickbacks. Every kid that he sent to the private prison, he got a cut of the money that they were entitled to based on this kind of almost like a per pupil allocation, right? For every individual, they get extra funding. So, that one really turns my stomach. So we know that in certain cases it has played out in really terrible ways. I think that there are probably there are many judges or good judges who don't take that into consideration. But again, the way we structure that deal has massive implications. And, for every one that was exposed, how many never were? It's hard to prove that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so again, we know that money and incentives play out in good and bad ways time and time again, right? The only thing that you can get two economists to agree on basically is that incentives matter. And so we need to be really cognizant of that when we shape our contracts and the way that our public institutions get funded, so that we should be shaping them in ways that promote the goals that those institutions are there to serve and keep.
Okay, so as just a small single voter, if I want to make some changes to this, and I want to, organize other people who agree with me, what should we be looking at? Is this me talking to my state legislator, or are we talking about where do I even begin to start making changes to the cash bail system or all of these issues? If I pick just one thing, what's my next step?
Yeah, so for those of us in Illinois, there are a couple things. You can talk to your legislator, but also, my whole campaign was really about court rules. The really interesting, unique thing about our campaign was that I focused on rules of procedure, rules of evidence, and rules of ethics, which are rules that are in many throughout the country are authored by judges and by the courts, and in many cases, usually the Supreme Court of the state. Illinois is unique in that our Supreme Court is really the final arbiter of those rules. But these are policy things, right? These aren't like, it's not like deciding cases. It's about how we decide cases. It's about the rules and kind of the foundational underpinning on which the decisions are made. And that goes even into pretrial. So in Illinois and elsewhere, and everywhere where you're electing your judges, we should be reaching out to people to say, look, we want rules that, for example, lead us away from a cash bail system. Legislatures, we can do the same thing. Sheriffs, we can do the same thing. But each state does it a little bit differently. But in general, you're going to be in good shape if you lobby your legislator on some of this stuff.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So I want to switch gears now, and this is where I recognize that I'm not necessarily going to be fair to you, but with your legal background, I want you to kind of weigh in on some national questions that are now coming up. So we have now had 3 COVID relief bills that have been distributed, and we got our personal letter from Trump taking full credit for it yesterday. So it's a lovely letter. If you get one, read it. So we laughed and laughed.
Does it have the best words?
It is all the best words. It's all. And you know what? I should have scanned it so that I could put it up so everyone could admire the best words. It was wonderful and had his signature on it, and just it's stellar. So, but with the relief bills that have come out, we've seen the implementation of some of these transfers of funds have been less than ideal. For example, Mitch McConnell was talking about, and Andy, you'll want to weigh in on this. I want to read it so I make sure that I get everything that he said right. So Mitch McConnell was on conservative radio, and I forget which one, but this just happened. His quote was, for the 4th bill that they're working on, he is very much against some of the northern states getting the funds and instead is pushing them towards bankruptcy. And one of the things that he said was, we don't want to be incurring debt that our grandchildren will have to pay for. So, Andy, I thought of you explicitly on that. So, are we selling out our grandchildren to pay for some of these policies? Is that right?
Well, it's not so much selling out, it's just outright selling, right? Because each grandchild has a certain value. Of course, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm talking about the White House. Again, that's the neoliberal narrative for 5 decades has been trying to explain false scarcity and austerity and this in the United States. And why the heck would they want one little microorganism to fix that, right? To change that narrative and make it so that, all of that work that we've done was for naught, right? So we have to explain to people that although we've, given $15 trillion to keep the stock market liquid, that there's not enough crumbs left over for you, and that this is all credit card from China, BS once again, and we're not going to give anything because obviously the states are not sovereign entities. They cannot make the US dollar. That's, the US is the only one that can do that. And if you're going to be the United States of America, why not just increase the transfer payments to the different states to make sure that they can provide for the people of the United States in a so-called democracy?
Wait, Andy. Here's where I'm going to push back a la MSNBC because they discussed this morning. They had a congresswoman from New Jersey on, a state that's been very hard hit, and she explained that New Jersey was making sure that their small businesses were taken care of because they took all of that money and transferred it to the banks so the banks could distribute it. Do we see it?
Oh, yes. Actually, I believe it was sent in a personal check from the Rothschilds.
Well, so my problem with that is, we gave public money to a private institution to turn around and issue loans to businesses. These better be zero interest grants, not interest-bearing loans. But that's neither here nor there. So, Daniel, this is where I'm going to rope you into a truly unfair question. So, Mitch McConnell, when he was making these statements, he was on Hugh Hewitt's program, and I pulled down transcripts of it because the other piece that he was arguing for in Bill number 4 that they're negotiating now is tort reform. So, I'm going to see if I can share this so you can actually see it on your screen now. So, possibly, and I'll read it real quick for our audience just in case the screen froze. But it's this section right here. So, MM is Mitch McConnell. He's saying, talking about tort reform, I think it would be a good idea. Now, the difficulty of achieving that with a Democratic House, you can understand. They are a wholly owned subsidiary of the plaintiff's bar and rarely do anything that discourages litigation. Generally speaking, they are trying to create more litigation. So I don't want to get your hopes up that this very necessary step could actually be achieved with a Nancy Pelosi-led House. So all of this argument that they're talking about is they don't want the federal government, state governments, or private entities to be sued because of the way that they're handling the COVID relief. Everything from disbursement of funds through the Small Business Association to banks to PPE to things like that. So my question for you, Daniel, which is totally unfair, and I get that, is that realistic?
Is which part realistic? Is
their concern, is it realistic or no?
Mitch McConnell's concern about kind of tort law gone awry?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, probably not. I think it's hard to say exactly because you get kind of these anecdotes from cases where you can kind of cherry pick cases after the fact that seem like, oh, this was really a case where they achieved a bad result, or this poor small business was put out of operation by a greedy attorney who just wanted to run up the bill, or you can find these kind of anecdotes, but tort reform is really about a system-wide change, and it's not best done through anecdotes. And so the question in this case and in many cases is who gets to decide. tort reform, when people talk about tort reform, it usually focuses on two issues. One is capping damages, or capping the amount that a defendant might have to pay in a tort case, or making it harder to bring the case in the first place. And the question is, who gets to decide those issues, right? Is it better that a judge or a jury with intimate knowledge about a specific case gets to determine, what an appropriate award is, or what cases are frivolous or not? Or is it more appropriate that that our federal legislators make that decision without knowledge of specific cases? And I think there's a pretty good argument to be made that you're going to lose a lot of meritorious cases if you create this blanket policy that either caps damages or caps the cases that you can bring, just because you're painting with a broad brush all of a sudden. So the reality is that if you have to make a policy for a system, you're going to find stuff on the margins that are hard to swallow when you look back in hindsight. But that's not to say that the broad policy is a bad one. And I haven't seen data to suggest that that there's a really compelling need to change the answer to who gets to decide that from where we are now, which is people most in touch with facts in a specific case. That's changed in certain states, and it's not to say that answer could never change. It's just I haven't seen that data. So, but that's when I hear those issues. That's the question that I try to think about: who gets to decide, and who is in a best position to decide as to what cases should be able to be brought and what the maximum amount of damages should be. I'm telling you right now, I don't think I'm prepared to decide that right now. So I would need to know many more specific facts, and that makes me want to say, in general, we should wait to get specific facts about specific cases to make those decisions, as opposed to painting with a broad brush.
Okay, so it's a fair critique, except that it sounds like they're preparing to create new legislation and regulation attached to a stimulus bill or a relief bill that would potentially affect not only you, but courts across the country related to this issue, right? So would it not? Now we're speaking in hypotheticals here because we haven't seen what they've written or they're talking about specifically, but I feel like it potentially limits my ability to assert my rights in the face of gross negligence or something like that, where we have a known risk, and I have incurred damage because someone did not address the known risk appropriately. I mean, should I even be thinking that way, or how? This is just beyond.
It's hard to say. I mean, I just skimmed that quote that you put up on the screen. It looked like, I don't know who the other speaker was, but it looked like their concern was that that people may be open to liability in ways that are unique to the moment, and that would require some tort reform in order to kind of encourage people to take extra risk, right, in opening back up. And it's just really hard to say without seeing specific language. So I mean, I think you're asking the right questions, which is, are we, do we want people to encourage people to take additional risk as business owners or what have you? And the answer might be yes, but the answer might be no, and the answer might, and in trying to answer that question, we have to realize that who's on the other end of that risk, and the answer might be us. And what are our opportunities to recover if it is? And it's just hard to answer that without specific language about what that bill might look like or what that language might look like.
True, and like I said, I knew I was putting you on the spot, but I'm looking at this from the backdrop of the same argument where state legislatures and Congress members are refusing to go back into session. At the same time, we have a push to get us back to work, right? So, in the context of liability, I think that is our answer. If you, as our leader, like, Daniel, have you been on the Supreme Court? If you're telling me that I need to go back to work, you better be there too, right? You better be here.
The skin in the game.
That's exactly right. So if they're not willing to do that, and let's recognize also that for every member of Congress, it's really their staffers that are doing the bulk of the work. So those people who are not making a substantial salary are also being put at risk. Most of them don't have health benefits. They don't have access to the congressional doctor's office the same way that a congressman would. So those people are also being put at risk. But I'm looking particularly at senators and representatives, people in the White House, making these decisions. At the same time, they're limiting my ability, or potentially limiting my ability to assert my rights, right? So to me, it's the same argument as the gentleman in the Michigan Capitol with a rifle over his arm, spitting in the face of the police officer who just has a paper mask, preventing them from going into the people's building.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a broader issue here too, which there's a bit of a bias issue, which is I think people are rightfully concerned that that the downturn in the economy could be really devastating, right? I mean, I think that's legit, right? That those figures, those dollars, relate to people's welfare. Sometimes it can relate to kind of life and death. But we also have to be cognizant that the figures that we get from, for example, like the stock market, are attenuated from sometimes our experience on the ground, and that there's a massive economic cost to people dying or people becoming infirmed that doesn't necessarily make the balance sheet until significantly later. And so, when you're trying to figure out kind of what's the best thing for our economy, the answer that looks good in the next quarter or the next 2 quarters may be very different from the answer that looks good if you're looking 3, 4, 5 years out, right? Because death and infirmity take a huge cost, impose huge costs on the system as well. They just don't show up on balance sheets in the very, very short term sometimes. We see that in law and criminal justice policy sometimes. People will talk about, what are the costs of operating our criminal justice system, and sometimes they'll just leave off of the cost-benefit analysis the benefits of reductions in crime, the benefits of reduction in violence. And the economic costs of violence are huge, and so that's something that has to be part of your balance sheet. You can think about this kind of the same way. What are the economic costs of people becoming sick, people dying, the kind of big impacts to families and firms? And if we're just thinking about this in terms of the next day on the stock market, I think we're not doing a true accounting of what our balance sheet really looks like from a human perspective, and we're not making our decisions with a full accounting.
Phenomenal point, and I think on that we're gonna have to end it because we could go on for hours and hours and hours. And Daniel, you have been so insightful. I appreciate you coming here. Any last thoughts you want to? I mean, this is kind of a big ask, but any last thoughts you want to leave our audience with when it comes to criminal justice system, tort reform? What one thing do you want them to take away from this conversation that you think is most important?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number one thing is that courts should be all about finding truth and restoring people. And if we have systems set up that financially reward them for anything other than finding truth and restoring, then we should be concerned that they are they're catering to bad incentives, whether they know it or not. And we can fix that. We can restructure those things so that our public institutions and the way that they are supplied are structured so that we're promoting truth we're better achieving our goals without risking bad outcomes. So fees and assessments should be structured in ways that don't reward courts for finding guilt, but rather for finding truth. And that's something that we can do in our legislatures, and in some instances through reforming court rules. And hopefully we'll talk many more times about how to do that.
Yeah, we would absolutely love to have you come back first, because you were willing to get up early and talk to us about it. But this has just been a phenomenal conversation. So appreciate it. So, Andy, any closing thoughts from you, sir?
Yes, I would like to just add, this is slightly unrelated, but not really, that the quote of the day goes to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who, when asked about extending the additional $600 unemployment benefit provided in the coronavirus relief package past July, said, "Over our dead bodies."
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm willing to take him up on it over his, not necessarily mine. I think it's fair trade. So thank you, Lindsay. And on that note, we're going to get out of here. But I do want to make sure that, first of all, everybody stays safe. Be kind to each other. We're all having mental health issues, as well as physical proximity and general well-being issues. So do take care of each other. Try to be kind, especially on social media. And then join us back here Monday morning, bright and early Monday. We have a special treat for you. Yet another professor, Professor Young, and she specializes this is this dynamic hybrid between comedy and propaganda in the media. So do check back in. This is going to be a whole lot of fun to start piecing through what we see in the media narrative, in manufactured consent, and then putting it in the frameworks of humor. So join us for that Monday. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you missed some of the interviews that we put out, they're on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and on our website. Some amazing interviews with current candidates, former candidates. Last night we had Nick Clark from Vermont's Progressive Party talking about how they've been so successful in Vermont getting progressives elected. And then tonight we have really great interviews coming out. And in particular, we're launching Rome's Rebellion. So this is Rome from Rome 6 Mile on Twitter. He did a couple different ads with Bernie Sanders' campaign, and he has been just this phenomenal activist out of Detroit. So we are so thrilled to have him, and he's launching his show. These are short segments, but so powerful. So you don't need a whole lot of time if you're going to make your case in a compelling way. So make sure you tune in. Those will be issued in the evenings, I think, for the next 3 or 4 days, if we can get that up there. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we appreciate your support of independent media. We don't really have a whole lot in our space talking about the issues that we care about. So we appreciate your support, and if you would consider becoming a Patreon for as little as $3 a month. $3 a month, that's a third of the cost of a Starbucks cappuccino. You can support what we're doing here, the causes and candidates that we are supporting, and help our network grow. So please check that out on patreon.com, Progressive Insider. So for Progressive Insider and Hair of the Dog, I am Kerri Barber, and Andy.
Thank you once again, Kerri. I would say have a good weekend, but weekends currently don't matter.
That's exactly right. So on that note, we'll get out of here. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah, Progressive Insider, you know they wiser. Ooh, this that new